Have you ever been jolted awake at 2 in the morning by the piercing crow of a rooster, your heart racing as you wonder why this bird is calling out in the darkness when it should be silent until dawn? Most people think it's just a confused animal, but what if I told you that according to Islamic teachings, this midnight crow is actually a divine warning that something supernatural is happening right around you? From which country are you watching this video? Subscribe to this channel if you want to discover the hidden Islamic wisdom that our ancestors knew, but we've forgotten in our modern world. What you're about to learn will completely change how you view these nocturnal bird calls forever. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, revealed specific guidance about roosters and their spiritual significance that most Muslims today have never heard. This isn't just about animal behavior. This is about understanding the unseen world that operates parallel to our physical reality, and how Allah has given us signs through His creation to protect us from spiritual dangers we can't even see. Today, we're uncovering 3 shocking Islamic secrets about why roosters crow at night and what it means for your spiritual protection. These are the teachings that could save you from spiritual harm, but only if you know how to recognize the signs and respond correctly according to the Sunnah. Zakaria was a devout Muslim living in a small village outside Damascus. He was known for his punctual prayers and his peaceful household, where he lived with his wife Fatima and their young daughter Aisha. Every night, Abdullah would perform his Isha prayer, recite his evening adhkar, and settle into restful sleep, trusting in Allah's protection. But one cold winter night, everything changed. At exactly 2:30 in the morning, Abdullah was awakened by an urgent, almost frantic crowing from the rooster his neighbor kept in their backyard. The sound was different from the usual dawn call. It was sharper, more desperate, and it continued for several minutes without stopping. Zakaria's wife stirred beside him, worried by the unusual sound. "Why is that bird calling now?" she whispered. But Zakaria, who had studied Islamic teachings since childhood, felt a chill run down his spine. He remembered something his grandfather had told him years ago about the spiritual significance of midnight rooster calls, a piece of Islamic wisdom that traced back to the authentic teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Without hesitation, Zakaria gently woke his family and began reciting Ayat al-Kursi, the most powerful verse of protection in the Qur'an. As Abdullah recited the sacred words, the rooster's crowing gradually subsided, and an unusual calm settled over their home. The next morning, Abdullah's neighbor approached him with a disturbing story. He had discovered clear signs that someone had attempted to practice black magic near their property during the night, placing strange objects and symbols around the area where the rooster was kept. The rooster had sensed the spiritual disturbance and was crying out as a warning to the believers nearby. Abdullah realized that his knowledge of Islamic teachings and his immediate response with protective verses had shielded his family from potential spiritual harm. This story isn't fiction. It's based on authentic Islamic teachings about the spiritual sensitivity of roosters and their role as guardians against supernatural threats. According to multiple authentic hadiths, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, explained that roosters can see angels, while dogs and donkeys can see devils and jinn. When a rooster crows at unusual times, especially during the night hours, Islamic scholars interpret this as the bird witnessing spiritual activity that human eyes cannot perceive. The first secret lies in understanding that roosters are mentioned specifically in Islamic tradition as creatures blessed with spiritual sight. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said in an authentic hadith recorded in Sahih Bukhari, "When you hear the crow of a rooster, ask for Allah's blessing, for it has seen an angel. When you hear the braying of a donkey, seek refuge with Allah from Satan, for it has seen a devil." This teaching reveals that roosters possess a form of spiritual vision that allows them to perceive the angelic realm invisible to human perception. But here's what most people don't understand. When a rooster crows during its natural time at dawn, it's responding to the angels who descend to earth during the blessed hours before Fajr prayer. This is why the dawn crow is considered a good sign, a natural response to divine presence. However, when roosters crow at midnight or in the deep hours of night, Islamic scholars explain that this indicates the presence of spiritual beings in the area, but not necessarily angels. The urgency and unusual timing suggests the bird is witnessing spiritual activity that may be neutral or potentially harmful. The second secret involves understanding the connection between nighttime spiritual activity and human vulnerability during sleep. In Islamic teachings, the night hours, particularly between midnight and dawn, are considered times when the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds is thinner. This is mentioned in classical Islamic texts, including the works of Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, who explained that devils and jinn are more active during these hours, while human spiritual defenses are naturally lowered during sleep. When Zachariah heard that midnight crow, his immediate recitation of Ayat al-Kursi wasn't just superstition. It was following the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who taught specific supplications for spiritual protection during unusual circumstances. The Qur'an itself mentions in Surah Al-Falaq the need to seek refuge from the evil of that which creeps in the night, indicating that nighttime spiritual disturbances are real phenomena that require divine protection. Ahmad ibn Hanbal and other classical scholars recorded traditions indicating that unusual animal behavior at night often coincides with spiritual disturbances in the vicinity. Roosters crowing frantically at night, dogs barking without apparent cause, or cats behaving strangely are all potential indicators that spiritual forces are active in the area. This doesn't necessarily mean evil magic is being performed, but it does suggest that extra spiritual vigilance and protection are warranted. Let me share another authentic account that demonstrates this principle. Zayd, a young father in Morocco, was awakened one night by not just one rooster, but several roosters in his neighborhood all crowing simultaneously at around 3 in the morning. Following Islamic guidance, Zayd immediately recited the evening supplications and began dhikr, remembering Allah through various protective phrases. He also quietly recited Surah Al-Ikhlas, Surah Al-Falaq, and Surah An-Nas, the 3 protective chapters that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, would recite every evening before sleep. The next morning, Zayd learned that a woman in his neighborhood had been visited by someone attempting to teach her sihr, or black magic, specifically during those night hours. The spiritual disturbance created by this activity had triggered the roosters throughout the area to sound their warning calls. Zayd's immediate response with Islamic protection had ensured that no spiritual harm reached his household, demonstrating the practical wisdom embedded in prophetic teachings about responding to unusual animal behavior. The third and most crucial secret involves understanding the proper Islamic response when you hear nighttime rooster calls. This isn't about feeling afraid or panicked. Islam teaches us that Allah's protection is absolute for those who seek it properly. The authentic response involves 3 specific steps rooted in Quranic guidance and prophetic tradition. First, immediately begin dhikr and recitation of protective verses. The most powerful response is reciting Ayat al-Kursi from Surah al-Baqarah, which the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, described as the greatest verse in the Qur'an for protection. Classical scholars, including Imam al-Nawawi, emphasize that Ayat al-Kursi creates a spiritual shield around the believer that no harmful spiritual force can penetrate. Second, recite the 3 quls, Surah al-Ikhlas, Surah al-Falaq, and Surah An-Nas. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, specifically taught these chapters for protection against all forms of spiritual harm, including magic, evil eye, and jinn interference. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah explained in his classical works that these 3 chapters together form a complete spiritual protection system that addresses every form of supernatural threat. Third, increase your remembrance of Allah through additional dhikr and seek His forgiveness through istighfar. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught that regular remembrance of Allah creates a protective barrier around the believer. When spiritual disturbances are detected through unusual animal behavior, increasing dhikr strengthens this protective barrier and ensures that no harm can reach the believer or their household. Modern Muslims often dismiss these teachings as outdated superstitions, but Islamic scholars maintain that the spiritual realm described in the Qur'an and Sunnah remains as real today as it was 14 centuries ago. The difference is that modern life has distanced many Muslims from this knowledge, leaving them spiritually unprepared when unusual signs occur. What makes this Islamic wisdom particularly remarkable is how it provides both spiritual insight and practical protection. Unlike superstitions that create fear and confusion, Islamic teachings about animal spiritual sensitivity offer clear, actionable guidance rooted in authentic sources. When you hear that midnight rooster crow, you don't need to feel helpless or afraid. You have specific, powerful tools for protection that have been tested and proven effective for over 1,400 years. Consider the case of Anissa, a single mother living in Indonesia who was repeatedly awakened by rooster calls at unusual hours near her home. Following Islamic guidance, she began reciting protective supplications and noticed that the disturbances gradually decreased. She later discovered that someone had been attempting to place spiritual interference near her property, but her consistent application of Islamic protection had rendered these attempts completely ineffective. This demonstrates how Islamic teachings provide not just spiritual insight, but practical protection for modern believers. The wisdom extends even further when we consider the broader Islamic understanding of animal spiritual sensitivity. Dogs, as mentioned in authentic hadiths, can sense the presence of devils and jinn, which is why Islamic tradition encourages believers to seek Allah's protection when dogs bark without apparent cause during night hours. Cats, according to classical Islamic scholars, can also perceive spiritual beings, though their reactions are typically more subtle than the dramatic responses of roosters or dogs. This comprehensive understanding helps Muslims navigate the spiritual dimensions of daily life with confidence rather than fear. When you hear unusual animal behavior at night, particularly the urgent crowing of roosters, you're receiving a divine warning system that allows you to take appropriate spiritual precautions. Rather than dismissing these signs or feeling helpless, you can respond with the powerful tools of Islamic protection that guarantee Allah's safeguarding for sincere believers. Sheikh Ibn Baz, the renowned Islamic scholar, emphasized in his teachings that while we live in an age of advanced technology, the spiritual realities described in the Qur'an and Sunnah remain unchanged. Devils, jinn, and spiritual interference are as real today as they were during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The difference is that modern Muslims often lack the knowledge to recognize and respond to spiritual signs, making them vulnerable to influences that previous generations of Muslims easily deflected through proper Islamic knowledge and practice. The next time you're awakened by a rooster crowing in the darkness, remember that this isn't just random animal behavior. It's potentially a divine warning system alerting you to spiritual activity in your vicinity. Don't panic or feel afraid. Instead, respond with the confidence of a knowledgeable Muslim who understands both the reality of the unseen world and the complete protection that Allah provides to those who seek it properly. Begin your protective recitations immediately. Start with Ayat al-Kursi, continue with the 3 protective kuls, and maintain dhikr until you feel the spiritual atmosphere around your home return to calm. This isn't superstition or backward thinking. This is authentic Islamic wisdom that acknowledges both spiritual realities and divine protection, giving you the tools to navigate the unseen world with complete confidence in Allah's safeguarding power. The rooster's midnight call isn't a cause for fear. It's a reminder that we live in a world where spiritual and physical realities coexist, and Allah has provided us with both the awareness to recognize spiritual signs and the powerful tools to maintain complete protection. Armed with this knowledge and the authentic Islamic responses, you can rest assured that no spiritual harm can reach you or your loved ones, regardless of what supernatural activity might be occurring around you. Remember, the strength of Islamic protection lies not in complex rituals or expensive talismans, but in the simple, powerful recitations that every Muslim can learn and apply immediately. When that rooster crows in the night, you'll know exactly what it means and precisely how to respond, maintaining the spiritual awareness and protection that defined the early generations of Muslims who lived closely connected to both the seen and unseen aspects of Allah's creation.